to say thank you to Bethany and to Jonah. When the clergy are away, things can get a little crazy, so thank you for bearing with us, and thank you for your efforts. Being up here with my preacher hat on reminds me of the first time I ever did that. That sermon was autobiographical, which is a good way to start. The title was, "What's a Nice Lutheran Girl Doing Like Me Doing in a Place Like This?" At that time, I wanted to tell you the story of where I'd come from and how and why I'd landed here. Over the years, I've returned to this spot when I was asked to, but always with a text or a topic that spoke to me. I don't know if any of you or some of you have been around as long as I have, and you've heard me ask you to shout in foreign languages, to blow up balloons, to stamp your feet. And I talked to you about prayer and forgiveness and spiritual discipline because all of those things were important for me to talk about. Usually, when I've been preparing to speak, I tried to pull all the lectionary together from the Old Testament and the New Testament and the letters of Paul and the Psalms, everything that was available, and I'd study and try to make links between all of them. It turned out to be more like a research paper than a word from God, but I was learning. Today I have a message that spoke to me as I was studying, and I hope that it speaks to you too. There's one key thought that I found in one key verse in this reading. There are others who have, like me, stepped into this spot who also don't have preaching credentials. They were asked, and they stepped up, and they had a story to tell. Harry Smith, who was our pastor in the 90s, used to say, and just last week Bob Bennett said the same thing to me, that everyone has at least one sermon in them. So think about what yours is. And today I extend an invitation to you. And you say, uh-oh. I'd like to begin by turning your attention to the red hymnal. And I'd like you to turn to page 156. We're going to attempt to do this a cappella. I'd like you to sing it with me, the first verse, and especially the refrain. I love to tell the story of unseen things above, of Jesus and his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. There are other story hymns. There's the one about, this is my story, this is my song, and the one about, we've a story to tell to the nations. We could have chosen any of those, but this is the one that I kept thinking about as I was studying the gospel reading for today that Jonah read. One source that I looked at was a commentary on Matthew by William Barclay. And he used today's gospel text to say that the true function of the preacher is to listen, to learn, and to speak. This is verse 27 of Matthew 10 again. Let me read it to you. What I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. So if we listen in our darkness, in our loneliness, in our silent places, to Christ, earnestly seeking his voice, we can learn the truth from our reading and from our listening. And then we can speak, even if it's unpopular, even if it's dangerous. The preacher can't say anything truly that he or she doesn't know in his or her heart to be the truth. Anyone can speak with courage what they know in their hearts to be true, even in the face of criticism. When you know that you know that you know, that's something that you can say aloud. I pray that my words will be acceptable today, not so much to you, but to God, a true telling of the old story. The 10th chapter of Matthew, we didn't hear all of it today, but this is a sending off of 12 of the disciples, and at this point they were renamed as apostles. So we have all the names that you've come to know: Matthew, Mark, etc., Peter, James, Judas, and so on. Those 12, as apostles, they were given a commission. They were to go out and tell the story of salvation through faith in Jesus. They would be given power to heal the sick, raise the dead, and perform other miracles. However, a warning was given to them, and Jonah read a lot of that today. Jesus said, "Expect to be persecuted, just as I am persecuted. Expect to be reviled, just as I am reviled. Expect to be disbelieved and rejected. If they call me, your leader, names like Beelzebub or the devil, they'll call you names too." So these newly named apostles were to step out and go from being fishermen and carpenters and tax collectors all of a sudden to be public speakers. And I would imagine the fear of public speaking was the same back then as it is now. Somewhere I read that it's ranked number 1 above death and spiders and snakes and falling and everything else, the fear of public speaking. But Jesus said, "Fear not." Then they were told to say unpopular things like, "Leave your old beliefs behind and put your faith in Jesus. He's the Messiah you've been waiting for. Replace your legalism with love." And they were to lay their hands on the sick, speak life to the lifeless, and call out evil spirits. And Jesus said, "Fear not." They were to take along no provisions, no money, no extra sandals or clothing. They were told the laborer is worthy of his hire. It will be provided. They should expect a welcome and should bless those who welcomed them and showed hospitality. And if they weren't shown hospitality, they were to shake the dust of that town off their feet if they were not welcomed. And Jesus said, "Fear not." Finally, they should expect to be turned over to government officials and flogged in the synagogues. Their words and actions would inspire animosity from authorities, from spiritual leaders, even family members. It's hard to translate some of this into our current lives because we're not taking those bold steps as a rule. But I know even in my own family that a doctrinal dispute can part family members as long as they're not focusing on the love they have for each other. But Jesus said, "Fear not." There are actually 3 fear not statements that apply to speaking out in today's gospel reading. First, the messenger of the king should be fearless. We have that backing because the king is behind us. So don't be afraid to speak the truth that you've received from the king, and speak it with boldness. Second, don't fear people who can kill the body, but fear God, who can kill both body and soul. Now, Matthew was speaking primarily to the Jews, and the disciples in this story were sent first to speak to the Jews. Their audience understood a concept of holy fear, incorporating both fear and love of God, never forgetting the sheer holiness of God. Now, the Christian fears not that God will punish us, because that punishment was taken on by Jesus, but that we may grieve God's love. If we combine both ideas, our love answers God's love, and our reverence and awe and fear answers God's holiness. The third fear not statement that applies to speaking out is that we have the certainty of the detailed care of God. The example of the sparrow can be understood this way. If 2 sparrows are sold for a penny and 5 sparrows are sold for 2 cents, that 5th sparrow is practically worthless. It's thrown in because it has no value. And yet, a sparrow does not fall to the ground unless God wills it. Now, it sounds kind of cruel, but God willing a sparrow to crash to the ground. But the word in Greek is a translation of an Aramaic word that means to fall in the sense of to light. So a bird lighting on the ground or on a branch, something they do constantly. And it says, unless God knows it, it doesn't happen. That's the kind of wondrous care that God has for us, because Jesus said, "You are worth so much more than a sparrow. Even the hair of your head is numbered." Whatever happens, you can't drift beyond the specific, painstaking, minute-to-minute love of God. So we summarize the items about speaking out. You speak the truth because you know it. You fear God, not men. And God cares and protects you no matter what. So let's turn to another hymn, this time in the black hymnal. Number 2146. And I thank you from the last time that you helped me out when my voice went bluey. We're going to look at the second verse and again concentrate on the refrain. This, if you've got the right page, it says "His eye is on the sparrow" at the top. 2146. Let's look at the second verse. Let not your heart be troubled, His tender word I hear, and